Wilder Show podcast. I'm Scott. That's Lauren.
Hello there.
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good. You?
Good. I learned last time just to say I'm doing great today.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to spread that out over every day. When I tell you how I'm great for one day, it applies to every day.
Did you feel a little attacked there? I'm sorry about that.
No, it was okay. You kind of woke me up for that time, and I always appreciate that. WilderShow.com is where you find us on the web. Podcast at WilderShow.com is where you contact us. The Wilder Show podcast drops Tuesdays and Fridays at 6 a.m. Central Time on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, like, rate, follow, subscribe, and share. We begin with something that is really, really tough to talk about. I say I'm good. You know, none of us are as good as we'd like to be. When you think about the first commercial airliner in the United States going down since 2009.
Mm-hmm. Wednesday night.
Horrific. Just horrific. Still is horrific. The details are still unfolding. And I guess we should probably start with just what the president had to say about 20 hours after the event.
I'd like to request a moment of silence for the victims and their families, please. Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal, and I have to say the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, it was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people very sadly from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy Potomac was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a loving God.
Okay. Well, I have several things, Lauren, to mention about this. I first want to say I think that statement by President Trump was good. I was thinking, actually, as I was watching all that was happening, I hope for a good response, a good bring people together to the extent you can these days. You probably can't for everybody, but bring people together response. And I think he or whoever wrote, obviously, nobody writes their own stuff, so I'm not being disparaging, but it was a very well written and very well delivered. And I'll tell you something else. He didn't have to start with such a long moment of silence.
I know. It was really nice, though.
That was really something, I thought. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this, because when this first happened, I sent you a note immediately. I sent you a text, and I said, this is the same plane, the CRJ-700, on the same approach to the same airport where we were 1 week ago.
I know.
I have flown that, I don't want to say 100 times, 100 is hyperbole, but I've flown that route a million times.
Bunch.
Not a million, I guess would be more, but I really, a whole bunch.
Yeah. And recently. Quite recently.
Twice in the last week have we been on a CRJ-700, which it's a 222. I'm sorry, it's a 2 and 2. About 70 folks can be on the plane, and 3 to 4, 2 pilots and usually 2 flight attendants. And it's not my favorite, obviously. But you have to take it. You have to take the puddle jumpers and the different smaller planes when you're going, for example, to you go to DC, and then you leave DC and go somewhere smaller. And so, but I've loved Reagan National for, as you know, forever.
Many years.
I have loved that airport. Now I'm not as thrilled now that they have 5 terminals. I liked it when it was like 2 or 3. That was really easy with 2 or 3. It's a little more Charlotte-esque now, which is not my favorite. Traversing through an airport. But I've always loved the airport. I've loved flying into Reagan. I love it at Christmas time. I love it in the winter time. I love it. The American flag is it's a massive flag that is draped there in the middle of the concourse. And I've loved that airport. It also happens to be very, very close to where I work. And so when I've flown there before, and a couple of things about this whole thing on the Potomac. I know you remember, because I think I sent you a picture even. When I used to work there, I stay at Key Bridge. The Key Bridge there.
Is that an area?
It's an area. It's an area.
Hotel?
It's an area.
Okay.
It's an area.
Okay.
It's like the bridge is called Key Bridge, but that bridge area right there by Arlington National Cemetery is where I would stay in Arlington, Virginia, and I would stay there because it was close to where I worked. And I stayed at a hotel. It was a nice kind of an old hotel, but it was very, very elevated. It had a not a rooftop, but a top floor restaurant and bar. And so at the end of the day, I would go up to that and, have, something to eat. And I would always be facing out, and I would see the lights, and I would look out at the Potomac.
Yeah.
And just as you heard in the news reports, those military planes, those Black Hawk helicopters fly all the time.
Right.
All the time, up and down the Potomac. I would sit there and just watch. It's like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I'm through with my work day. I'm sitting there and I watch, here come 2 going in this way. It's also the same path that Marine 1 and the decoy Marine 1s, 2 or 3 or whatever, would fly. And then they would have the Black Hawks beside them. And I've seen that there. I've been there when we flew over it flew there. It was last week. It was frozen. The Potomac was frozen. Right. And so I've seen, you fly in that same, that CRJ-700. You are flying in that very same route I think there was originally scheduled to land on runway 1. They went to 33, but things changed. I'm not saying it was a mistake. And then, of course, the Black Hawk helicopter, encountered it, and the 3 in the Black Hawk helicopter perished, and the 60 or whatever the number was,
64,
perished on the 64. But that is the same way. In fact, Lauren, as we were flying in, I even commented. I said, "Isn't it amazing we're flying so low to the water?"
Right.
Do you remember that?
I do.
I mean, we were looking out. It's like, I can't believe it. We're right here. And there are other airports, obviously, where you do that. You fly into San Francisco, it's the same thing. Many, many, many other places. But it always strikes me because you take that big, wide turn to make it back along the Potomac. And it is a very busy airport. It's a very busy place. I love it, but it is very, very busy. And so I have flown that many, many times. Lauren, you have flown that many, many times. And every time, I don't think about things like that. Even in the year that I flew more than any other year, 37 weeks out of 52, I didn't think about those things. Obviously, anything can happen. But still, American air travel is safe. I mean, air travel generally is safe, and American air travel is safer than any other air travel in the world. I mean, it is the safest way to travel. And America sets the standard. And really, that happened in 2009. It brought about all kinds of changes in aviation, in technology. It brought about changes in training, a number of years of service, all those things. Those all were changed because of what happened in 2009. Some would argue, and I certainly would agree, that we've been as safe as we've been because of the lessons that were learned by that horrible thing in 2009. It will also be the case here that you will have lessons that are learned. I have no idea. I've been pretty glad that there hasn't been as much finger pointing as I was expecting. There have been some. Both sides will always say, was it because of budget cuts here? Was it because of Trump froze this there? Was it because of whatever, the old regime? There hasn't been as much of that. That will probably come with time. But the time right now, and I think the president set the tone correctly when he basically said, not in these words, now is the time to comfort the people who are suffering.
Right.
And we will have smart people deciding what happened, and we'll figure it out as we move forward.
Plenty of time for blame.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now is a time for. You wouldn't probably call, Trump the quintessential comforter in chief, but he can be that. Sure. And honestly, in the thing we just listened to, I think he was that.
Yeah. And
so. Hey, good on him, and good for us if we can, bring people around to be the people to be their better selves or whatever, the higher way.
Any loss of life, of course, is tragic, but something that was significant about this was the 14 figure skaters and their coaches and families that were on this plane. They were returning from the U.S. National Championships in Wichita, Kansas. And I don't, when I was watching television over the weekend, I scrolled past some figure skating. I don't know if it was this
really?
Or not, but yeah, it was. That's what's getting a lot of press right now. And then also there was something I had. I'd read something very shortly after, maybe like early the next morning, about John Maravilla, a skater who it was rumored or reported that he was supposed to be on that flight, but couldn't get on because his dog that was traveling with him was too big. So he couldn't get on the flight, had to go rent a car and drive home. That was a rumor. He was turned away at the gate because his dog was too big to board the flight, but he was headed to Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
He was not supposed to be on that flight. He was trying to get onto a different flight.
You know, that route, the Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National, has only been around for a year. That direct flight.
Yeah.
And it is one of them, I can't recall his name, one of the senators, a current senator from Kansas.
Had lobbied for that flight.
Had lobbied
right?
for years and years to get this one flight, you know, for his constituents, for himself. I mean, obviously, he flies back and forth. To be able to fly to Dulles, he could fly into Reagan National. Reagan National is so convenient. I mean, you are literally 7 minutes from where you want to be.
Right.
I mean, you get on a what do you call it? Uber? An Uber?
Uber?
You get into I was saying of YouTube, but a YouTuber.
Yeah.
But no, you get into an Uber and you're there, you know, very, very
no
quickly.
Time.
Yeah, no time at all. So it's a great airport for convenience. It's very, very close. And great for lawmakers. Many, many lawmakers fly. In fact, most lawmakers, I think, fly into Reagan National because that's just the most convenient for their purposes. And so they've been lobbying for years and years and years, trying to get this as a nonstop, and they finally got it. So it's only been going for a year, and you know, then you have the whole. I kind of feel bad for some of the pilots and the crew of some of these other these CRJ 700s because they are not. It is American in name, but it's not an American. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's operated by somebody else. It's American Airlines on your ticket, but it's really by somebody else. When we flew this last time, I called him LeBron James because he looked just like LeBron James.
The flight attendant?
But he sat in the aisle right between us.
Yeah, because we were in the last row.
The very last row.
On either side of the aisle.
It's like, really? I mean, that's the safety is the guys.
That was his designated place during the flight.
Hold on to my leg and your arm, and that's how it's going to be.
Sitting on the floor.
That's going to be how you stay safe. So you can't not fly small aircraft, okay? And they're not small like a Cessna. But if you're going to go anywhere, you can't only fly 737s or A321s. I mean, just it can't. So you gotta find how you're gonna fly this other thing.
It's not ever been my favorite, though.
No, it's not.
I gotta tell you that.
It's not. It's not for obvious reasons. I mean, it's cramped. You got one lavatory in the very back of the plane. You can't take your roller bag onto the plane. You have to check it there on the what's it called, the jetway.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of. It's like, okay, really. But, you know, if you're going to a smaller place, you got to do it. So, in any case, Wichita, Kansas is such a place where they use those regional jets. And the CRJ 700, not a bad plane. This is not a mechanical failure.
No.
I think what they may find is, here's what I think. Not that anybody's keeping track of this, but I believe that when they contacted the helicopter pilot, and asked him, do you see the CRJ 700? And he said, I do, or I have visual. It may come out that he was looking at the wrong plane. There were two planes. If you saw the video, there were two planes that were coming in sort of on that same trajectory. So he asked for there to be visual separation. And the very next thing, I don't know if you heard this or saw this, the very next thing on the exchange was a sigh by the air traffic controller who said, oh my. And the very next thing was down, 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 or whatever they say in their parlance. Anyway, it's tragic. It doesn't make me nervous about flying. I mean,
not even a little.
Not at all. I mean, not at all. I got to remember, I flew back into the United States after 9/11.
I know.
I mean, 9/11. It's like
that's
that's crazy. How could you fly back from China into the United States after 9/11? I mean, it's got to be the most dangerous time in the world. I said no. It's got to be the safest time in the world. So it is still the safest thing. Obviously, we don't cover all the planes that land safely for a reason. That's not news. It happens literally every 5 minutes, all day long.
All over the world.
All over the world. Actually, probably every minute all over the world. But every now and then, there's something that happens. I hope that politics can stay out of it for both sides and they would just comfort those who've been lost, or the families of those who've been lost, and find out what the problem is and go from there. I think that would be the best. That would be the best scenario. So very, very sad. Didn't expect, obviously, to be talking about this today, but you do.
Mm-hmm. Something else that I saw in the news, actually saw in National Geographic, I wanted to mention to you. The title of the piece, or the sort of the secondary title, "Kids are losing fine motor skills. Are screens to blame?" My first response was, well, duh.
I mean, yeah.
This hits really close to home for me because I don't have any grandchildren yet. This was not really an issue. The television was a big deal when our kids were little, but other screens, not so much. Maybe Game Boys came in later on, but certainly not like kids have access to today. And you're about to have a grandchild. I don't have any grandchildren yet. And I have this dream of not being a meddling grandma. But I already know that if a screen is in front of a kid's face, it's going to be all I can do to not say something that might get me in trouble. And I got to tell you, reading things like this don't make me feel any better about that. There's a survey in Education Week that is a part of this article that found that 77% of educators reported young students having greater difficulties handling pencils, pens, and scissors. 69% noted increased struggles with tying shoes compared to 5 years ago. And they said, forget about blocks. It's like they've never seen a block. You give a kid a couple of blocks to stack and you show them how to stack them, and then you put the block in their hand and they still don't, they don't know what to do with it.
They're saying that kids can't hold a pencil because the kids have been on screen time too much?
Because they're spending way more time on screens than they ever did. And I'll go ahead.
I don't know the end of your study, but the Scott Wilder study says the problem may not be the kids are on their screens too much. Maybe their parents are on their screens too much. If the parent, it's a parent's job to make sure kids know how to hold a spoon and hold a crayon and tie their shoes. I mean. Yeah, we're gonna get to all of that, but you're right. You're on exactly the right track. So kids, in fact, are losing critical fine motor skills, but experts say it's not only about screen time; it's a mix of that and changing habits and a shift in childhood experiences. You might wonder if the pandemic played a role in this, and to some extent, it might have. Kids who were at home with parents who were working led to more screen time than they might have already had. Kids, parents had to work and their kids were at home. A screen probably played a role in some of that. But then Stephen Barnett, who's the co-director of the National Institute for Early Education at Rutgers, he thinks this started way before the pandemic. That time spent on screens, phones, tablets, even television is time that kids aren't crafting, drawing, building, all the things that develop those fine motor skills. And, digital art, things that kids do on a tablet, that can be really creative, but it doesn't develop that fine motor control that comes from writing and cutting and coloring. And when you add to that outdoor play is also declining, less digging, less picking up rocks, less flower picking. That adds to it too. Also, here's less crawdad fishing.
Less crawdad fishing, for less hook baiting.
That's right. That's right.
Also, convenience things that parents that are make life so much easier for parents, like stretchy pants with elastic waists,
correct,
Velcro shoes, pre-packaged snacks. All those things are great convenience things, but they eliminate buttons and zippers and shoelaces and experience with utensils. Also, reading for pleasure, way down. So what are kids not doing if they're not reading for pleasure? They're not turning pages. That takes a lot of focus. And the focus for something like that is kind of like the key to things like zipping and tying shoes. What were you going to say?
I know we've talked about it before in the Go Times. There are things that develop in your brain that you have no idea. Those things are these things. You say, wait, what does that have to do with this? And I go back to the, what is the study that I always talked about? It was the study about crawling and walking.
Oh my God! Yeah.
But what is the thing that it resulted in? It was
for kids,
not autism. It was
no,
whatever.
dyslexia.
Dyslexia.
Yeah.
And so what they had found was maybe not a causal, but certainly a correlation at the very least. Children who did not learn to crawl before they walked more likely had a problem with dyslexia.
Yeah.
And so they took children who had dyslexia and part of their therapy, and this sounds kind of crazy, but part of their therapy, they made them crawl again. So they learned to crawl.
There is something about the motion,
Something
the forward,
yep,
backward
yep,
motion.
the back and forth
with
of the hands, your eyes going left and right, something about all those things that you would have no idea impacts. Well, I don't want my kid to have dyslexia, so I don't want her to walk before she crawls. She really should crawl first. You think, well, that's crazy. But there are little things like that fire off things in your brain that connect things that are there for other things. One more thing about that.
Yeah.
There was another one, and it was stuttering. What they found was that left-handed people who had been sort of trained in the olden times that, you don't want to be left-handed, nobody's left-handed, that's wrong-handed.
Tied their left
be right-handed.
hand to the side of the body
something
to
like
keep
that.
them from using it.
Yeah, and so they made them learn to write with their right hand. Those people developed a stutter. And if you go back and look at the people that are stutterers in the olden times, there was something about the forcing of like being right-handed if you were not naturally, like 10% are not right-handed.
Yeah.
And so trying to make them right-handed actually impacted something in their brain that impacted their, whatever the lobe is that impacts your speech, that they became more likely stutterers. And you had to have that stuttering that you had to deal with, all because of this thing that you think, well, A, couldn't possibly have anything to do with this, but in fact it does.
Can I say just one thing that has nothing to do with this really? You said olden times a few times. I think only people in the olden days said olden days. I don't think I've heard anybody say olden days.
True. That's I'm
in
not going to stop.
In a couple of decades. Anyway, so you might ask, what do we do about this now? What is a parent of a young child to do? And there is no easy way to get these things into your kids' routines, especially if they are already connected to their tablets or your phone or an e-reader or any of those things. If you take away the tablet and say, okay, now we're going to read or now we're going to color, you will meet resistance. So educators recommend what was one of my most powerful parenting tools, bribery. Craft first, color first, read first, then screen time. And how do you know if your kids are having too much screen time? When your kid tries to swipe a book, that's a pretty good tip-off.
There you go. That's funny.
We've seen that though, right? Haven't you seen
people pinch something?
I've seen a kid try to, a baby try to pinch like an 18-month-old.
Make it bigger, make it smaller.
An actual photo, a physical photo to try to make it bigger.
That's funny. We will have Scattershoot coming up. I do want to invite you to pray for the families that are impacted by what happened this last week. Just horrific. And it does make me watch everything. I watched all of the coverage. I watched it in the middle of the night, watched it early morning, and we'll continue to watch it. And we will remember them in our prayers, and we invite you to do the same. Okay. Scattershoot's coming up. Scattershoot, Wilder Show, Scattershoot. Speaking of that, Lauren, a couple of follow-ups on, didn't we say, where did that even come from last time?
Scattershoot. The word scattershoot.
Yeah,
we did.
We were wondering, is that Larry King? I think you said Larry King.
I think I did say that, yeah.
I thought it might have been somebody else. You know who it was?
Who was it?
The late and oh-so-great Blackie Sherrod.
Of course it was.
The Blackie Sherrod. You know, he wrote for the 100 years ago, before there was a four-star telegram. He wrote for the Fort Worth News or whatever it was called. Then he moved to the Dallas Times-Herald. Then he moved to the Dallas Morning News. And he had a thing on, I think his Friday column was called Scattershooting.
I'm kind of bummed I didn't remember that.
Well, me too. I feel, you know what else? You know what I did?
What?
His book, this is how bad it is. There's a book called Scattershooting. Blackie Sherrod columns. It is out of print, and I found it, and I bought it.
Where did you find it?
So I have a place, and so I bought it. It's on its way. It won't be here for about a week.
Okay.
But isn't that cool?
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
So columnist Blackie Sherrod, a sports guy, okay, if people don't know. He was a great sports columnist, kind of a rough and tumble-ish guy. And this scattershooting column was just littered with things like, make mine sunny side up with 2 slices of bacon, extra crispy. You know, and sports people went crazy. They're like, this is not sports. This is just annoying. But you know what?
Well, it birthed a whole sports talk radio
it sure did.
generation.
I'll tell you something else. I think it really is. I really think it is the first blog post. I mean, he was like the first blogger. It wasn't a blog, but it was that thing of almost these extra things. So anyway, I mean, I remember the Dallas Morning News. I mean, Dallas Morning News would hit the driveway at the end of the day. Dallas Times Herald.
Yeah, Morning News was in the morning, Times Herald was afternoon.
Then we became a one-horse town. It was only Dallas Morning News. But it was kind of fun when there was a Dallas Times Herald, Dallas Morning News had both. We got both in our house. Were you around when there was both? The Dallas Times Herald and
I interviewed for a job at the Dallas Times Herald.
Oh, did you really? For doing what?
It was a promotions thing. Yeah.
Son of a gun.
Yep.
Yeah, I still remember. Let's see. Call 748-1414. 748-1414.
It's the Dallas Times
Herald.
Call
the Dallas Times Herald classified. Get results like you've never seen before. Isn't that weird? We can know that 45 years later or whatever it is.
No. Oh my goodness.
Kind of sick.
It's probably 35.
Look it up. It's a long time. Anyway, Blackie Sherrod had a column there. Man, he was just the man. He was really fun to read. And so that is where Scattershoot came from in its original iteration. And then I looked up the different definitions of scattershooting, and here's what I came up with.
Okay.
A way of doing or dealing with something by considering many different possibilities, people, etc., in a way that is not well organized. And that's what
that works for us.
That's what we do. That's what scattershoot is. So there you go, scattershooting. And thank you to the late and really so great Blackie Sherrod. And I cannot wait to read those columns that will come in a bound book in only days. So there'll probably be more reflections on that. But I wanted to give you that update. And another update. No one sent any email to you this week backing me up about the lizards.
I know. I looked for it.
No, I
watched for it.
I did get some instant or a message directly to me.
Okay.
That said, I've gone every year all of my life, and I don't know what you're talking about. Now, I think she is younger than I.
I think that's called a direct message.
Well, whatever it is. But anyway, she is younger than I, and so she doesn't remember. So I looked it up.
Okay.
And here is the answer to the thing that you think that I made up. And we're talking about, I had always said, and every year when the state fair rolls around, the great state fair of Texas, when it rolls around, I say I miss some of the olden times of the great state fair. one of those things was you could get a lizard, a little chameleon, and
live.
A live chameleon.
Yeah.
And it has a little thread attached to its neck, like a little
Like
noose.
a leash?
Yeah, like a leash.
Leash is better than noose.
Yeah, I'm sorry, like a leash. And then on the other end, it has a safety pin.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get it, if you win it or if you bought it, they would pin it to your shoulder and to your clothing, not to your skin, but to the clothing.
Right.
And then, of course, because it's a chameleon, so it would change colors if it would move to different parts of your clothing. So over here it's brown, then over here it's green or whatever it is. And Lauren has always said that she doesn't think that's true.
I can't. I mean, you know how sometimes things from our childhood, we blow them up over the years and make them bigger or gorier or more adventurous even than they really were. So I guess I've just wondered about that.
Well, here we go.
Okay.
Some called them American chameleons because they could change color and blend into their surroundings. And they were sold at the State Fair of Texas in the 50s and 60s. Vendors would display the lizards on flannel boards and sell them with a little string leash and safety pin for people to wear at the fair.
Okay. I stand corrected. I still think it's kind of gross.
Well, I didn't say it wasn't gross. It's just,
now I
but there you go.
Yep.
The 50s and 60s. So it really would take someone, older than me, probably, to remember it. But, it was probably in the, the mid 60s where you could get that. I mean, I remember 66 probably, 66, 67, maybe 65, maybe that young. I know I went there when I was quite young.
I wonder, does it remind you, or does it say anywhere in there how much would that set you back to?
I don't even remember. I think you could win
tickets?
Yeah, you could win it. In those days, you actually paid for it. It wasn't all computerized and whatnot. But so it was a big part of childhood. I mean that, and I won't talk about the freak show, all the things you can't have at fairs anymore. And but the lizard thing, I still
those
think
were the
is
days.
Well, yeah, they really the kind of the good freedom days, the kind of stuff that doesn't even make sense and is offensive to a bunch of people. Like, who's in charge of the lizards? These are from Florida. How did they get here? These little anoles or whatever they're called.
We did used to have a couple of those. My boys had a few of those when they were little. Anoles in a fish tank that a heated fish tank.
Yeah.
So much stuff
Yes.
went into having these anoles, and we left a little crack because there was a tube or something that we got it all set up. Within days, one of the anoles was gone.
Was paws up?
So, well, we didn't.
Escaped, you mean?
He escaped.
Oh,
we
nice.
found him paws up many
On top of the
moons
Encyclopedia
later.
Britannica or something.
Yeah, it was someplace. It was even kind of grosser than that. We once,
All right.
not for now, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, there you go. So there are a couple of updates from last time. The scattershoot, it is Blackie Sherrod, and we will always acknowledge that. And the lizards, it is not a legend; it is for real.
It's consider yourself vindicated.
Well, thank you.
Have you seen the news about what was the most streamed television show in 2024? Most streamed.
You always say television. Yeah, I'll make sure you don't mean like a movie, or do you mean a limited series, or is it a television show?
This is a show.
So it would be like. I mean, I'm not saying this is my guess. Could I guess? Is that okay?
You can guess.
Okay, I'm not saying this is my guess, but an example of that would be, or would it be, like The Office?
It would be something like that.
Okay, so that would be a show that would be in the category of one that might be the most streamed.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Streamed. I know you have to take it. Here's what I would take into account: streaming as opposed to watching on broadcast.
Right.
So that means it probably has there's an affinity that is a younger affinity for it. It wouldn't be, Matlock.
That is true.
Something younger, appealing.
And let me tell you too, it's measured in minutes. Not in episodes, but in minutes.
So sticking with it is important.
I guess, or maybe multiple viewings.
Yeah. In case you're playing Candy Crush at the same time.
Well, that, or, I mean, I think you were kind of I was going to give you a hint. I don't know if you really even need it.
I probably do.
I bet you might very well say that you have never even heard of this show.
Well, then
but that will not be true. I would say give you 2 years, and I bet you will be much better acquainted with this show. Oh,
goodness. Is this something blue? The critter that's going to be a movie soon?
It's Bluey.
Told you.
Bluey was the most streamed show in 2024. 55.62 billion minutes.
Okay, but you got to first explain for the rest of us what
Bluey is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's an Australian-made animated series. It's about a 6-year-old blue heeler dog named, appropriately, Bluey, and her family. I've only seen this show a time or two, and I was with a bunch of kids when I saw it. And so we watched the episodes that we had access to. We watched them multiple times. And I have a feeling if my kids were little now, this would be something that we would spend a lot of time watching.
So it'd be like Blue's Clues or one of those.
It's not like that. It's not that, like Blue's Clues was like a response kind of thing. Like it was interactive. This is not like that. This show is popular with both kids and adults. I can't remember if I said that or not, but adults love it as much as their kids do. 43% of the viewing time was from kids ages 2 to 11. 11.9. So 43% of the viewing time was from kids ages 2 to 11. That means that 50% of that time was not kids ages 2 to 11.9. So, and I know that could mean anybody 12 and up also, but still, it's a really cute show. Bluey was ahead of other popular shows like Grey's Anatomy, big streamer, Family Guy, big with the streamers, Bob's Burgers, and NCIS. Now, the other significant thing about this was it was close to matching the 57.7 billion minutes of the show that won the year before, and that was Suits. That in 2023, 57.7 billion minutes were spent streaming Suits. And so that's kind of a shift, from a show decidedly for adults to a show that is predominantly for kids.
They're doing a Bluey movie.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's coming up next year, I think.
Well,
yeah, it's going to be, you can look it up. Not now, but I mean, whenever. But there's going to be a Bluey movie. It may be live action. I don't know what it is, but they have to take, you got to take everything and milk it till there's nothing left in the udder.
Okay, well, listen, that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because something that I read about this a while back within the last year, the creator of this show, the voice of the the kid dogs, Bluey and her little sister, were his kids.
Oh, his son.
And he wanted to end the show when they were too old to do that. They were not going to sound like little girls forever.
Correct.
He didn't want it to go on forever. Major outcry because people wanted, more and more and more new. And he said that was really never his objective. He wanted to capture this time of childhood, and when that was over, he wanted it. He wanted it to be over.
Son of a gun. But that thing about the majority of the people that are watching are 2-year-olds. The 2-year-olds are not setting it up. I mean, it's a parent that is putting a 2-year-old in front of it. No 2-year-old, they can't go, potty on their own, but they're deciding what their video tastes are. It's you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it's a little bit weird to say. It's like saying, 28% of the people who get their ears pierced are 4. It's like, no, that 4-year-olds aren't doing it. The parents are taking their kids to get their ears pierced.
No, the kids are still getting there. That's two different questions.
Who's deciding? Who's deciding what to watch? Who's deciding?
Yeah.
If you get a haircut a certain way, 48% of third grade boys have mohawks. I mean, that's That's a parenting thing. That's not a kid thing.
Yeah, but I think it's still two separate things.
Yeah,
the kids still have the mohawks or the pierced ears, or they're still sitting in front of Bluey, regardless.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that that when you say, you're right. I mean, the parents are deciding, and so the viewers of them are 2-year-olds.
Yeah, and even a 2-year-old, if a 2-year-old's not interested in it, they're not going to stay there. They're going to get up and walk away, or they're going to ask for something different.
Demanding 2-year-olds.
They are that. I mean, if you remember.
I try not to remember everything that I know.
They're great, but they're demanding.
Yeah, they are. One thing before we depart, one other update. There is a Wilderism that we left out.
Which one?
And it's a pretty significant one. These are the little sayings we used to say on the radio 100 years ago. And we give you a bunch of them in the last one. If you didn't catch the last scattershooter. There's a bunch in there. We left this one out. Why ruin the illusion of who I am with the reality of me?
I didn't really think of that as a Wilderism, though.
Oh, really?
I mean, I thought of that as something like specific to you.
Yeah.
Something that you felt was
true.
Not
That's
something
true.
that could be necessarily
one of our
taken
sayings,
to
though.
the masses,
That's
for
true.
everyone to use.
Yeah, the heart of that is, if you've listened to me or us or whatever, and if you, are happy, let's just not meet. I don't want to mess it up,
Yeah.
Why ruin the illusion of who I am with the reality of me? Anyway, there are other Wilderisms we probably forgot, but thanks for listening. WilderShow.com is where you find us. Wilder Show podcast drops on Tuesdays and Fridays, 6 a.m. Central Time on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeart, Amazon, YouTube, and some bunch of others, wherever you get your podcasts. Podcast at WilderShow.com is how you can contact us. Like, rate, follow, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening. And by the way, tell a friend about it. Just forward this to a friend, and let's grow our little space of this world. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Da 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 da